Welcome to this series of modules on the 4 foundational documents that are likely to be useful when writing a proposal. Writers will want to be familiar with the STARTALK-Endorsed principles, the World Readiness Standards, the Necessful, Actful, Can-Do statements, and the TEL framework. This module will address the STARTALK-Endorsed principles for effective teaching and learning. You may find it helpful to download the overview document of the STARTALK-Endorsed principles in order to be able to explore each of the 6 principles in more depth. As you develop your responses, familiarity with each principle will help to ensure that your proposal is aligned with the principles. The principles are implementing a standards-based and thematically organized curriculum, facilitating a learner-centered classroom, using the target language and providing comprehensible input, integrating culture, content, and language, adapting and using age-appropriate, authentic materials, and conducting performance-based assessment. The 6 principles are foundational from proposal to program implementation and serve to create common expectations for all programs. Let's look at each principle in a bit more detail. Implementing a standards-based, thematically organized curriculum involves thinking through the written, tested, and taught curriculum, ensuring that that curriculum is standards-based. Programs should plan to develop a curriculum that addresses each of the 5 goal areas of the World Readiness Standards. The STARTALK principle builds on that statement by recognizing that a curriculum must also be cognitively engaging and relevant for the age of the learner. It must be a curriculum that is communicatively purposeful, one that uses language that will be used in the real world, and it must provide a strong indication of clearly articulated unit and lesson goals. Keeping those 5 aspects of a standards-based and thematically organized curriculum in mind, student programs must specify in their goals the theme that will guide standards-based instruction and learning throughout the program, and teacher programs must identify the STARTALK-Endorsed principles that capture the focus of their programs. Let's move from implementation of a standards-based curriculum to the next principle, facilitating a learner-centered classroom. A learner-centered classroom requires that learners are cognitively engaged. Ruby Payne defines teaching as what occurs outside the head. That brief definition serves as a reminder to minimize teacher-centered instruction. To ensure that students learn, they must be actively engaged in the process. Learning, then, is measured by what occurs inside the head of the learner. As lessons move from input to output with a gradual release of responsibility to the learner, there is a need to ensure that learners are engaged in work that is relevant, work that moves them from guided practice to an application activity that allows learners to show that they can independently demonstrate that they have met the goal of the lesson can-do statement. Both the student and teacher proposals ask for descriptions of the learning experiences with an expectation that those experiences clearly indicate how students and teacher participants will apply in real-world ways their new skills. Learning experiences move from input or acquisition to application of new learning. Student programs must describe the learning experiences that will allow students to acquire and apply new knowledge and skills, and teacher programs must describe the learning experiences that will be designed to allow participants to acquire new knowledge and teaching skills useful in their own teaching settings. Moving to the next principle, using the target language and providing comprehensible input. Using the target language is certainly not a challenge for native speakers of the language. The challenge is to make sure that that input is comprehensible, Learners must understand most of what the speaker is saying for language learning to occur. And that input must be meaning-bearing. It must be useful input that learners want and need to understand. There must be some communicative intent. In order to successfully implement this principle, the curriculum will have to be standards-based and thematically organized for the age and proficiency level of the learners. A well-defined theme makes it possible to design program goals and learning experiences that can be accomplished while using the target language. Teacher participants will need opportunities to consider how this principle can be applied in their own classrooms. The next principle, integrating culture, content, and language, ensures that students are using the target language to learn more about the world they live in. Integration of culture, content, and language ensures that communication is meaningful as students talk about the real world. The sample curriculum shown here, Water, Water Everywhere, allows elementary learners to talk about the role of water in the target culture, water pollution, and the target culture's attitude toward that pollution, as well as allowing learners to talk about water-related activities in their own lives. Learners engage in meaningful communication that is purposeful. The standards-based and thematically organized curriculum ensures relevant context and purpose for learning. When creating program goals and describing activities, student programs will need to specify how they will connect culture, content, and language. And in the implementation aspect of the proposal, they will need to identify activities that allow the program to integrate content, culture, and language in meaningful ways. Let's look at the next principle, adapting and using age-appropriate, authentic materials. The use of authentic materials that are written by speakers of the target language for native speakers of the language, brings the real world to the classroom. Such materials are culturally rich and offer models of correct language. Most importantly, they have tremendous potential to create interest and spark learner curiosity. Selection of such materials requires attention to the age and proficiency level of the learner. Let's continue by looking at conducting performance-based assessment. Both student and teacher programs are asked to provide specific examples of how they will collect evidence of student and teacher participant learning. For each program can-do statement, programs will create a performance assessment task. The student proposal asks for one sample task in either the interpersonal or presentational modes of communication. The teacher program assessment question asks how programs will know that participants have met the major goals of the program and what evidence the program will have that teacher participants are able to transfer new learning into their own classrooms. The example shown here is taken from the Model Student Curriculum, Let's Go Somewhere, for grades 6-12. The program can-do statement, I can describe things I see and do on my trip, sets the expectation for the actual task. The sample performance task then describes the expectations and stipulates the type of product or performance. Here, the purpose or goal, I can describe things I see and do on my trip. The performance in context, which is a spoken report on a specific region, and the expectation, visuals, completion of graphic organizers, and presentations for small groups, and then parents. There is a sample of a teacher program assessment in the TEL framework module that is part of this series. These principles are also found on the StarTalk website as mentioned at the beginning of this module, and you may find it helpful to download a copy as you work on your proposal. For additional resources concerning the proposal, you may wish to visit the Applicant Resources page shown here. StarTalk and the National Security Agency thank you for your interest in submitting a proposal to promote the advancement of critical need languages for both teachers and students of those languages. Thank you.